everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about coastal armoring in California and how seawalls and revetments reshape the beaches and change erosion patterns. We're going to be looking at a real life example, a home experiment, and then the pros and cons of seawalls and revetments. So over time, the waves do erode our coast, and this is an example of that. Without seawalls, it erodes and moves the coast farther back. This is an at-home experiment you could do. There's no seawalls, and you can see that as the waves hit the beach, it drags some of that sediment back in to the ocean and causes the houses to fall into the ocean. This is an example of a revetment, which is natural like rocks, or sometimes people put human-made like rock structures to try to deflect the waves or slow down the waves before they hit the houses. This does have pros and cons, which we will discuss after I show you the at-home experiment of this revetment. Here is a more close-up video of, you can see the water's hitting the rocks and kind of like splashing off and slowing down. Here you can see that the waves are still hitting the rocks and some of the water is going through and eroding a little bit of where the house is, but it mostly deflects off to the side and is eroding the sides of where the revetment is placed. In that red lines, you could see where that like erosion that is occurring. So this is a after view shot of what that looked like, seeing that sand being dragged out into the ocean. So let's talk about some pros and cons of revetments. Some more pros of it is that it's more natural looking, just because it's more like stuff you would naturally see there. There is less wave refraction because it does let some waves through, so it doesn't just straight up splash it back like a seawall would. But it does let some waves through, and it allows space for organisms to grow between the rocks. And it does take longer for it to be damaged just because it isn't as in place. It moves more often. Some cons is that, as you can see, it still does let some water through and it still can slowly erode the coast. It's not as protective as a seawall. And then since it deflects the waves off to the side, it erodes the sides, which we saw in that video. And then its storms can more easily like move the stones around, so it could drag that revetment out to sea. Here's a real life example of a seawall. We can see that these are much harder structures. They're more likely to create drastic back waves and rip tides, because when it hits, it just goes straight back. These are very, very invasive. Here is a at-home experiment of using a seawall. So the wood blocks would be the seawall. We can see that the waves is still pulling that sediment in from what's in front of the seawall, but everything that's behind the seawall is very well protected. That sediment's not really moving at all. It's staying put. The house is staying put. There is some water that goes a little over it, but not much. And so this is the before view. You can see that nice big long beach. And then the after view, you see that a lot of it has been pulled out to the sea. This is just a side view of the before, where you can see it's all kind of clustered right there at the front. And then there is the after view, where you can see all that sediment really did get dragged out into the ocean, which is happening in real life with our beaches. So let's discuss some pros and cons of seawalls. The pros is that they protect the houses behind the seawalls very well. They are very well at making sure that erosion does not occur as much, or that it takes longer for erosion to occur. And then if it's built right, it can last a lot longer. It would last years and years. And it's easier than beach replenishment, just because with beach replenishment you do have to find the sand that's the right size, the grain right grain size, right color. Some cons is that it erodes the front of the seawall, so all those beaches that are in front of those seawalls are getting eroded fast, away, and it has no replenishment because the beach will naturally move back, but because there's a seawall in there, it's not able to move back. It can also stop sediment flow from moving sand down the beach to other beaches. There's no ecosystems that can grow on the seawall easily, and it takes away from the natural beauty, as most seawalls are really unnatural. So with this, I asked you, do the pros of seawalls and revetments outweigh the cons, and are they really worth it? And lastly, here are the sources I used to create this video. Thank you for your time.